Ignite. Innovative Impulse für die Verlagsbranche.
Herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge von Ignite Publishing, dem Podcast von Zebralution Digital Publishing und dem Digital Publishing Report, der sich mit den Innovationen in der Verlagsbranche beschäftigt. Ich bin Daniel Lenz, Chefredakteur beim DPR. Diesmal habe ich einen ganz besonderen Gast in der Folge, den ich schon viele Jahre kenne, Nathan Hull. Ein Mann, der schon 2009, also vor 15 Jahren, das allererste Audiobook auf Spotify veröffentlicht hat. Damals arbeitete er noch in der Musikbranche. Jemand, der Coldplay in einem Pub in North London mitentdeckt hat, der mit U2 den Launch von Spotify mit orchestriert hat und der sowohl bei Universal Music als auch später bei Penguin Innovationen vorangetrieben hat. Heute arbeitet Nathan für Beat Technology, eine skandinavische Firma, die Audiobook- und E-Book-Services für die Verlagsbranche anbietet. Und auch dabei geht es ganz viel um innovative Ansätze. Nach Einschätzung von Nathan leben wir gerade in den aufregendsten Zeiten, die das Verlagswesen je erlebt hat. Warum das so ist, das müssen wir genauer besprechen. Es geht im Gespräch um KI, um die Chancen von Direct-to-Consumer-Vertrieb. Es geht natürlich auch um die Rolle von Verlagen im Wettstreit mit den Tech-Giganten wie Spotify und Amazon und es geht um Erfolge und Misserfolge. Nathan ist ein Mann, der weiß, wovon er spricht, wenn er sagt, be curious, be courageous. Viel Spaß beim Hören. Welcome, Nathan.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm fine. What about you?
Good. Sun is shining. Can't complain.
It's fucking raining in Cologne. But it's a perfect environment for our talk today, our podcast talk for Ignite. So Nathan, you've been involved in innovation in the TV, in the music, in the publishing industries for a couple of years so far. Perhaps for our listeners who do not know you, could you briefly describe your different roles and your missions?
So as you said, I started in the music industry, mostly on the artistic side of things, not as a performer myself, but managing bands. So I was on the creator side. Then I turned to the dark side and went to work for a record label. So I worked for Universal Music and kind of headed up a lot of innovation coming out of London at the time there. Then I was kind of still managing bands at the same time. So there's a lot of complicated overlap. That involved some TV. So it's not like I haven't worked loads in TV, but we did a big TV show out of LA for the whole of one summer. So that was a steep learning curve. And then by luck, really, I kind of got approached to move into publishing, which I'd never really considered. And I joined Penguin in the UK. And I've never looked back since. Stayed in publishing, but now, since I left a publishing house, I've worked mostly in the tech side of things with startups and scale-ups.
All right. And you've delved into many innovations in these different industries. Looking back, what innovative ideas or products from your time in music or in publishing are you most proud of?
There's still a lot I want to do, but I would say looking back, because in my head, innovation doesn't necessarily have to mean technology, right? It can be around ideas that change. So I think a lot of my examples would be using existing elements that kind of bring a different experience or are joined together in a way that other people haven't really thought of. From music, I put launched Spotify with U2. That was pretty big. So this is, how everyone always remembers U2 for putting the free album on there.
Yeah.
What people have thankfully forgotten was the record before that was also given away for free, but it was to launch Spotify.
Which one was it?
No Line on the Horizon, which did go to number one, sold a bucket load of records that still did really well. But I think at the time, Spotify probably only had like a few thousand customers in the UK. It was being distributed via codes to like the cool kids in East London. And then it was time while I was at Universal to decide, are we really going to back this or not? So when we decided we would, give them the biggest band on the planet was the plan. So we did that. That was a partnership. See, this is all about partnerships. This was Spotify plus U2 plus the Guardian newspaper. And then it happened to get picked up by the national news and everything like that. And then joining, this was the catalyst for me actually getting into publishing. I put the first ever audiobook on Spotify. So everyone thinks Spotify.
The first ever audiobook?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, wow.
2009.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and we think Spotify, I mean, I know Germany is slightly different because there was always the inroad, but in terms of audiobooks having their own dedicated area, everyone thinks it's kind of 18 months old, which it is on a grand scale. But yeah, the first ever audiobook, 2009, it was Owen Colfer's And Another Thing, which was the follow-up to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically, I did it while I was at the record company in partnership with Penguin. And that's, I guess,
All right.
they got to know me. Yeah. So that was fun.
And then they wanted to sign you.
Yeah. That's it. It was all a long-term plan of mine.
There's this cool guy from Universal.
Yeah.
You have to hire him.
Yeah. But like I said, there's still I've got these ideas. I've got an ideas pad, and I've got 3 or 4 from probably when I was in publishing that still haven't happened. That still would be really pretty innovative today. So let's never say never.
And is it frustrating for you to see these ideas you haven't realized?
No, because everything has its time and place, right? So there's lots of things that have happened that I've done that have happened way too soon. I think the idea was still strong. The consumer demand might not have quite been there at that time, or the technology didn't quite fulfill it as well as it could at that time. But you can always revisit things. So, yeah, it can be frustrating at the time. But looking back, there's a reason why things don't happen.
What about your biggest failure?
Well, at Universal, there was do you remember Facebook?
No.
No, it had this blue logo with an F in it.
Okay.
It was pretty big. They came in as part of a beauty parade where we were trying to decide which social media platform to back. They didn't get chosen. I don't know whether I'm allowed to talk about these things, but
it's a long time ago.
And it wasn't just on my shoulders, that one. But that was probably one that got away. I do.
And why did you refuse?
Because the platform we chose, which I'm not going to name, we just deemed as having a better idea.
Okay.
I think it lasted less than a year. It didn't do well. There's a few things in music. When I first started out, I was in A&R looking for new artists. I did it for some music publishers at the time, and then also for a management company. And I failed to persuade the manager I was working with at the time to sign this 4-piece band called Coldplay. He thought their demo was a bit shit. So
you said that the demo is shit?
No.
The other guy, okay.
Them play in a pub in Kentish Town in North London. They weren't the band I was going to see, but they were great. They were kind of geeky at the time. I mean, there's a lot of footage of them online from that period of time, but they just had some great songs. And I've still got the cassette somewhere of some demos. And the manager just didn't get it. Told me to move on, find something else.
Okay, but this was not your failure, was it?
My failure would have been not trying to argue the case stronger.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a few things like that. I mean, there's always the collective failures sometimes. I think, if you're responsible for like a certain department at a company and things like that, there's probably more personal failures around individual situations I think I could have handled better at work, things like that. Or, I'm sure anyone who's hired staff along the way, there's some people that you failed to hire that you really wish you had because they've gone on to do great things, but maybe the timing was wrong there. Or maybe there's people you have hired who you wish you hadn't. So there'll be personal ones like that where you're the sole person kind of in control of those moments.
So you discovered Coldplay.
No,
amazing.
I'm not saying.
Yeah.
Honestly, there was about 20 A&R people there that night or something ridiculous.
Okay.
Everyone in the audience was an A&R person. So they probably all walked home with the same cassette. I don't know. But
the first 2 albums of Coldplay were amazing, were great. And then they went to the dark side of the pop business, I think, but it's another topic. So you've worked for very big companies, and I think, I assume that you've had the experience of hitting a brick wall in these large companies.
Oh man, there's just so many because it's just part of it's the nature of the beast. If you're trying to do anything new and innovative, it's part of the learning curve is hitting those walls. And it might be on an individual idea or, it might be a wealth of things coming in at any one time. And it might be you go through, so say at a company like Penguin or Universal, you'd have to go through a signing off process for the upper echelons to agree. Maybe it's for the financing or just the resourcing and time they're going to allow you to focus on it. And you can go through all of that and then suddenly fail miserably. But in terms of hitting a brick wall, I think that's more of a prevalent feeling sometimes in startup and scale-up world. So if you're trying to launch something from scratch, and it might be you're tasked with finding new markets or something like that, and you're going to these markets, say in publishing, and you're speaking to the publishers the first time to try and acquire content, and it's just so alien or different to what they're used to. It's a wall, but not something that can't be knocked down. It just takes a lot of time and patience and encouragement, and there's like an educative process you have to go through for people to learn a lot, and that can be, but that's different market to market, in different territories, different parts of the world.
But could you say in general that these brick walls are taller in these big companies than in startups in general?
Yeah, I think that's probably fair because they've got a lot more to lose, right? So a startup, of course, they've gone through a process, and they're either completely bootstrapped anyway, or they've gone through some form of capital raise. But there's that eagerness and agility, and generally they're smaller teams. The line of reporting's much slimmer. So in my role, it'd be me with no reporting line because I'm just set free to do something, or I just report to the owner. And those kind of routes are much slimmer. Whereas in a big corporation, it's just there's a lot more for them to lose. There's reputation. There's a lot more rigor in terms of the bureaucracy you have to go through, and P&Ls and sign-off procedures and all sorts of other things. And so it can just take a lot more time. Or it might be, you've got more contract work to do, like the legalities of things. Whereas a startup, yes, you've still got to think about these things, but someone just helps you write the contract. Whereas within a ginormous corporation, the lawyers, the legal team will be doing every other kind of contract that the big publishing house or record company has to do. So you'll fall way down the line and end up as part of a bottleneck. But I don't call them brick walls. They're just barriers, right? They're hurdles. And part of the learning process is being aware of how long things can take and just becoming used to it, really. And like knowing what buttons you can press to move things faster, what you can prepare in advance before you take it to these potential walls, what groundwork you do, keeping your contract shorter, all sorts of things along the way. But then, of course, in startup world, as you get more and more of a reputation, the walls can get, if we're using that analogy, they can get a little lower each time. Say with my current company, we can now go in, we've got a great portfolio of big publishers. So the other big publishers around the world will look at that in our marketing documents, be like, oh, wow. So that's one of the barriers straight away. Or if they're thinking about the security of their files, for example, something very relevant. But if you can show that you've passed the diligence test with the Penguin Random Houses or the HarperCollins of this world, then it makes people feel a little bit more comfortable that, you're not working out of a basement somewhere in Düsseldorf.
Yeah, right. Düsseldorf.
I don't know why.
Awful city. Yeah, totally right. Couple of years ago, nearly everybody was moaning about the state of innovation in publishing. Yeah, they always said publishers they do not like innovations, very conservative. But what about today? What do you think? What is the current state of innovation in publishing, both in general in the industry as well as specifically in the audio business?
Well, there's still a lot of conservatism, right? I think it depends which lens you look through, right? There's the industry as a whole. So by that, I mean publishers, I mean platforms, I mean startups, the consumers as well. That's super vibrant. It's really rich. There's stuff happening from every angle. There's stuff that kind of catches us off guard every week. And it's here to kind of disrupt and enthrall and all those good things. Then if you look at it through the lens of a publisher, I think that's where the conservatism can creep in. And it's understandable. I understand why, like we said before, they've got other risk elements to consider. But it does mean, I think, publishers really need to kind of, it's the bigger ones, right? Not every publisher can do this, but you have to create a space where it's safe to experiment and to gather data from those experiments and to like practice different things quietly, and then bring them in, and have just gone through that process of living with an idea a little bit and using it rather than just saying yes or no and taking a meeting and answering some questions. So it is, but the richness really is coming from the outside in. But I think that, so I would love to think there's more richness from the publisher's side to it, to embrace that and be excited by it. Like AI just being one example. If you look at something like 11 Labs and all they're doing in all of their guises, right? And there's so much stuff that's written where people are just either fearful of it or, just shouting it down or saying it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that. Well, but how do you know? Maybe you are making those comments founded on some experimentation. I don't want to say nobody's experimenting, but a lot of people seem to say things without, the minute you ask them the first question about it, you realize they're repeating something from dinner last night. West said it. So there is stuff happening. And I think what's really exciting to me is around the world, you get people, some countries that just aren't affected by the big outsiders or the big conversation that, like, I might be in the UK and Scandinavia, you might be in DACH, or the Americans, whatever. But if you go, to farther flung places in the world, and they're just like, cool, there'll be the publishers going, yeah, we've got audio rights. What do you want to do? Publishers or a startup might be saying, we want to do this. They're just doing it because they're not encumbered by all of the other crap that the mature markets have to think about. So sometimes there's a real freedom in that. There's a risk always, but
and these are the markets you're especially interested with Beat, right?
We're not especially interested. Everywhere's interesting, and we look at them through. We hope we look at things through their own lens, right? So we'll look at the climate in the not the climate, but the economic climate of a market. We'll look at hardware penetration. We'll look at connectivity. We'll consider what the publishing landscape looks like, what literacy rates are like, whether that's an opportunity or a hindrance. There's all kinds of things we'll look at, but nowhere's closed apart from some very obvious places. And, and of course we have to work out whether it makes sense as a business. Every now and then we're able to look at something a little bit more philanthropically for a longer term game, or something that feels like a good cause and there's a different reason to do things. But what I'd say was these markets, and I recently referred to them somewhere else, like places that have just really caught me by surprise, like Mongolia, Uzbekistan, Rwanda. With the greatest respect to those countries, they're not the places that most people would expect audio innovation to be coming from. And it's not innovation that's necessarily going to affect other countries, but they're not trying to do that. They're just trying to create something in their local language for their local market and doing it really, really well. But it's something I think other people can learn from that. So I'm always kind of willing to share those stories and examples when they've grown a little bit more, because there might be things that the rest of us can learn from. At least be encouraged by and support as a collective,
Yeah. You just held a speech for the guys of Zebralution in Berlin, and there you said the future isn't being created by the publishers or the record companies or the film and TV studios. The innovation is coming from the outside in. It's coming from tech innovators and so on. And there are lots of examples for that, right? The ebook was not invented, but it was grown fundamentally by Amazon, by Kindle. The digital audiobook was created by Audible, right? And there are lots of examples for that. Wattpad was founded by a company which did not derive from the publishing business, right? But from a community perspective. Is that a kind of law of nature that these outsiders invent the most interesting products and channels?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm not, I've never kind of thought that there's anything differently. Look at the music world. It wasn't like any of the record companies. Well, Sony invented the CD, right? I think, but who invented the download? Who invented the ringtone and all these kind of, they all come from the outside in. And it's about, with all of these cases, it's about how the rights holder, so whether that be a book publisher, a movie studio or a record company, react and embrace these innovations. That's the key, right? So when I talk about lack of innovation coming from these rights holders, I think I probably do mean the the ability to embrace, right? And I think that's in the book world, it has, they've always got the beautiful printed item to always fall back on, right? And it's never going to go away. And neither should it, right? They've always got that. So their argument back on going, well, we can afford to be conservative because we sell this many books and people love books. But people love books and will still buy that many books regardless of whether you embrace this change or not. So I kind of just wish there was more R&D in terms of money and resources put into the publishing houses. So I think it's this, you're right, that it is the law of nature, but there is this sense of fear that gets in the way sometimes. It almost encourages the other side of things.
A sense of fear, perhaps a lack of budget.
Yeah, and certainly, like, away from the big five in the English-speaking world, I'd say there's lack of budget. Maybe the fewer bigger independents do some stuff, some clever things, and there's independent individual ideas. And sometimes these ideas don't always fall under the innovation category because they're not necessarily tech-driven, but that doesn't mean they're not innovative. But again, it's different market by market, because in countries, let's say countries where monopolies don't exist, there's more room to disrupt individually, because you're not worried about, oh God, if I do this, then this big guy aren't going to sell books for me anymore.
It is a little bit frustrating, isn't it, that these disruptive ideas cannot come from content producers themselves.
Yeah, but then there's two different types of content producers. There's everyone's a content producer. Look at you right now. You and I talking. We're producing content, but we're not a publisher, a book publisher. We're not a magazine publisher. We're not a movie studio or record company. There's always amazing things happening, but it's whether a book publisher, they're commercial companies. They have to be able to make money from it. Whereas innovation doesn't always have to be about making money. It can be about telling stories in an amazing way and presenting things in a beautiful way to a listener or a reader that they haven't experienced before. So there's loads and loads of stuff that happens in the innovation world, in hubs and universities and these kind of things. And like, you go and look at the various documentary festivals around the world. So much of them are hybrid experiences that aren't just sitting in a movie theater and watching a film. They're immersive, but those immersive experiences are really hard for a book publisher to take on board and make money from. And these are the things I used to love. I'd find them at Penguin all the time and then just be like, oh. And then I had to have to translate, can we make money from it? Probably not, to the level they would want to. First, for the time investment into going into it, you could break even on a lot of things, but yeah.
Yeah. If you work for a publisher today, what kind of products or channels or campaigns would you like to test?
So this would really go back into this point I made about having more room for R&D into research and development in terms of budgets and staffing it. I think.
What about audio only products, for example?
Well, the first thing came to mind, it would actually be across e and print as well, and that would be discoverability tools. Our content world are being flooded more than we can ever comprehend. So particularly in audio, say, with all of the AI recordings that are coming out now, the ability to discover and filter, I think, is that there's just got to be a lot of focus put on that. Otherwise, for book publishers' recordings to be discovered amidst the millions of titles that will appear, I think it's going to be a fundamental challenge.
But what do you think of optimizing metadata?
I don't know. Yeah, I haven't really given it a lot of thought beyond like someone needs to do something. I mean, look, one funny anecdote. Have you seen so for all of the great work, and it was great work that came out of the UK, and I know Germany and other markets have shared that this concept around labeling, a correct labeling convention for AI voice recordings, right? So that's being adopted in a lot of the mature markets. A lady called Laure Saget, who's the boss of Audiolib in France, joked at a conference and said, maybe we should actually be labeling the human recordings. And they've actually gone ahead and done this instead, because it's the human recordings that need highlighting amidst the millions of other recordings that are going to appear. I think there still needs to be I've said it a lot, but there still needs to be a lot more experimentation around formats. Audiobooks don't have to be 8 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours long. Chop them up, try and serialize them, do different stuff. And again, it's still only the super mature Scandinavian markets that really seem to be playing with that at all. Mm-hmm. But we know the habit per day is relatively small, and more like a podcast habit. And I think there's some innovation to be done in terms of business development and the places where people might discover audio for the first time. So at the event you mentioned, I talked about the consolidation of music services and audiobook services, Audible's partnership, with their sister Amazon. And there's so many examples of this, like Apple could do it, Deezer can do it, etc. But then beyond those and making them move faster, one of the examples I gave was Netflix. It would make so much sense to me or maybe they are, the big publishers to be discussing commercial terms with Netflix for audiobooks. Netflix had games for 4 years. That doesn't feel as close to the consumer. Games and movies don't feel like sisters, whereas audiobooks and movies are both narrative arcs. More games are as well, but more so. They feel tighter. And just the fact that there's not even just a carve of content on Netflix feels slightly odd to me. So I think there's a lot more innovation to be done in that space too.
But is it sufficient simply to embrace the innovations of the outsiders?
Well, it's better than not doing anything. And it lessens your risk, right? So you've got risk in terms of your time and effort, but the actual monetary development, technological development could be put on the other people, and the resources for keeping these things up and running. I think the investment then from publishers comes on backing the right horses.
Yeah. But we're talking about big companies. We're talking about Bertelsmann and so on. They should have lots of budget.
Well, I was at Penguin Random House I was at Penguin when the two came together, owned by Bertelsmann. And there still are, to my understanding, gatherings of all the Bertelsmann-owned companies that come together with their heads of digital or whatever the titles are from the various things to come together and collaborate and learn. I don't know what orders put in place in practice. That's a genuine I don't know. I'm not saying they don't. I don't know. I mean, maybe some of the things that appear every now and then are combined efforts. But then again, though, Daniel, that's one example. There are more, but they're always the big publishers. But what about where the innovations for the mid-sized publishers and beyond? They have to embrace the outside.
They could join forces and try to create something big.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of there's conglomerate.
Perhaps it's naive.
No, I don't know. A lot of Beats platforms internationally have been a few publishers coming together, and that's just for a simple D2C platform. But and in the UK, we've got the Independent Alliance, kind of with, headed by the likes of Faber and Faber, who are really big, but kind of along with a few of the others, paving the way for all of the other publishers underneath them. But yeah, it has to be. I think if you're not in the upper echelon, there has to be a collective coming together with an idea to push forward.
One problem for the publishers is if the outsiders create something new, you have to follow their rules, right? Yeah. You have to, accept the Audible terms, for example.
Yeah.
Here in Germany, we just did a survey among more than 100 publishers, and we asked them about the sexy shit, what they are thinking about. And direct distribution was one very big topic. And you at Beat, you're supporting this attitude, right? And that could be very interesting because you enhance your own freedom, right? If you create your own shops, your own channels.
Yeah, I mean, so because our elevator pitch is just that. It's like you improve your margins, you're in control of the marketing, you get all the data back, you've got that one-to-one dialogue into a customer's pocket if they've got an app for listening or reading. The challenge then is discoverability again, getting people to come to your destination. So it's not for everyone. And I think at one point in time, Spotify arrives with audiobooks, for example, in the UK, the US, DACH, and France, Netherlands now, more to come imminently. And it's like, what will that do? Will that make more publishers be like, it's pointless me going direct to consumer now for audiobooks? Or actually, does it make it even more important? that they have because it's not about one or the other. And if you can get a percentage of your listeners or readers to come through your channel, you've got better margins and all these, but you're learning and just about those consumers and how they read, how they listen, and you've got a line of dialogue with them, and then you're not putting all your eggs in the one basket. Or in the UK now, we've got 2 baskets for audio, but neither of them are our best friend.
Yeah.
So.
But I think it wouldn't be a good idea to try to compete with Spotify.
No, it's not about competing. It's about having something else to offer with something. And if you're the publisher, you're closer to your authors. There might be elements where you play around with your content strategy. Might be the formats or the how often you publish. It might be that you window material. It might be there's extras. It might be that the author of the book is willing to do something different for your own site. There's so many tiny little things. But
what about these, I don't know the English word, verticalization, vertical shops? Mm-hmm. There are not many publishers who try to do a shop together with other publishers on, I don't know, health books, health services.
Yeah, there's not many. I mean, there's, but they're always, I was about to give the example of something like manga and graphic novels, right? There's a lot of these conversations happening at the moment where publishers could go it alone, but they see value in collaborating. But it's not they're not always being prompted by the publisher. It's someone else coming in with the idea of a vertical and saying to the publishers, can we have your catalogue of this niche?
Same procedures every year, right?
The same procedure to create a different vertical. Trying to think whether we've got examples otherwise. I don't think we do.
But these shops you're introducing in foreign countries with Beat in other markets, are these vertical shops or do they offer a broad catalog there?
They're different and they change over time as well. So in some cases, because historically a lot of our stores will have been a big publisher or 2 big publishers coming together to create a store. And it might be to more fair, in their view, more fairly remunerate an author. It might be to engender better communication with readers, whatever. It changes over time. So over time, as they start to grow, most of them do welcome other publishers on board. So, they establish themselves as a household brand name, as a destination for good books or good audiobooks. And then so it makes sense to pull more on. Really depends on the maturity of the market. So Scandinavia, every couple of years, it flares up into an argument about exclusive content on different stores or not. And then, you got other platforms go and buy publishing houses just so they can have exclusive content. So it changes all the time. And I think that can get influenced by what happens on other types of platforms. So, once upon a time, that made less sense to have it fractured. But then as consumers, we've got used to Netflix doesn't have everything, Disney doesn't have everything, etc. So we have got multiple subscriptions. Music's the only one that's kind of, because of Spotify's dominance, it's the only one that eventually felt like it had everything. It's not quite got everything, but but at the moment, internationally, it's just what's appropriate in a given market. And it depends on what the launch strategies are, who's launching it, etc. So Netherlands is a good example. When we first launched there was a partnership between, I think it was 5 big publishers and an independent bookstore chain and a media company.
Great.
It is now owned by the media company. But this was a bunch of publishers. It took a long time for this to happen. You can imagine the kind of the infighting, friendly infighting, the politics internally, the positioning between different publishers on that. So it took a long time to come together. But now it's wholly owned by the media company and absolutely taken off like a rocket.
Okay, great. I think you worked for a startup Netherlands, I think, where you offered these subscription models for a curated kind of books. Did it work in those days?
Yeah, I think that was an idea. Someone actually told me the other day. It was called Book Choice. I think, and it does still exist in the Netherlands. And as you said, it was more like a membership club. So it was curated eight at the time, at least. It was 8 titles a month in both ebook and audiobook, and it was a low price point. It was like €4. Someone actually said to me the other day, man, that idea is ahead of its time. Like,
Definitely, I think so.
because I talk a lot about partnerships and B2B still now. There's things we're doing right now. Like when I finish this chat with you, I'm going to take a couple of meetings today on partnerships. Did it work? Yes and no. So it worked very, very well in the Netherlands, and it's to the point where we ended up. I've got to be careful what I say. We ended up part of a much, much bigger machine. We were like 25 people in a startup, but suddenly we were the biggest publisher and 300 bookshops in no time at all, it felt. So that was a story of going way big too quickly and then kind of popping ourselves and having to shrink back. But there was routes where some markets work better than others. But what I would say, my biggest takeaway from that whole period of time was people's love for books. Yeah. And there were strange examples. So you always hear about people partnering with airlines or telcos, right? They're the obvious things. But one of the weirdest ones I had was partnering with the national energy supplier of Spain. Do you look at your energy bills or just be like, oh my God, they're going to take money? So this was pre everything being online and automated, right? It's when you would get the bill in the post through the door. And it was as a softener that you open the bill and you suddenly like, wow, 200 euros? They're taking it. And then there'd be the free offer for some free books. And it was a softener for them like that. But that was the strangest one, where they actually wanted books to do that. And they were paying good money to the publishers. So it was a really different business model internally for how we paid out to publishers. But yeah, this is one that will be revisited a lot. Not in the same guise, but it will in terms of the principle of partnerships.
But coming back to this approach of curating titles for a subscription, the same principle as a playlist, isn't it? As a curated playlist.
Yeah. Ultimately, yeah. But then you could strip it back again and say, with the algorithms that run on subscription services, etc., some of that is algorithmic and other parts are human curated. It's the same thing. The editor on these sites are curators, right? That's what they're doing. Some of it might be paid for placement or negotiated placement with publishers. A lot of it, I know in our case at least, a lot of it will be the editorial team sitting there thinking about what's trending, what they've personally loved listening to and what they've discovered, or seasonality, and they'll have calendars they work to, etc. And this is why the subscription services are so healthy for the backlist, because you can just algorithmically things get pulled out too. Yeah. But it's just with the services that have got tens and tens of thousands of titles, or even less actually, you can just pull out things, discover gems that you wouldn't find otherwise.
You just mentioned AI briefly in our conversation, and to my mind, there's a very big disagreement emerging between publishers, agents, authors, translators, kind of clash of cultures. Do you think that we still can prevent this clash of cultures?
Well, I think it always exists anyway. It just, we all like to talk about it a lot. I mean, it's the same like when, when ebooks first had their big spike. It's like, how is this going to damage our industry and the love of print and paper? And there's always something. I think the AI debates that rage, though, they're very different to me. There's the one, I think it's ultra sensitive when it's about the creation of something. We're not seeing much pushback on AI aiding process, right? You may hear about people being worried about, it replacing human roles and these kind of things. But I think in the creative industries, particularly music and publishing, it's ultra sensitive when it's on about the creator. But with audio in particular, the likes of you and I as consumers, or if we're sat in publishing houses, it's a very different conversation or a different set of considerations around what that means to us versus if you're in an emerging market with no access to anything, because like the affordability of creating an audio, because you and I know it, is just very different. So if suddenly using whichever tools or whichever platforms AI generated audiobooks can be made very cheaply, very quickly, then we can't look at it through the same lens. So it's just not a simple conversation. But again, I think everyone needs, all of the publishers just need to be considering. And I think the kind of platforms and experts and all there's all this raging debate all the time, but I kind of think we're feeding it, as opposed to actually there is stuff just happening. And there's some really good stuff happening. There's some really great use cases for AI making sense, even in like the English language markets or the German language markets. So imagine one great example that came up at the Bologna audio forum where 11 Labs spoke, and they said, imagine you've got a celebrity author who's insistent on reading their autobiography, and you kind of know it makes sense commercially because that's who people want to hear, but they're shit. They get in the studio and they're just terrible at doing it. Back in the day, and I've done a lot of these at Penguin, you will spend days and days and days and days with this celebrity, getting worse and worse and worse. They don't want to be locked in a room for 9 hours a day, and you're running way over time and budget. With AI, you could capture a fraction, like you could capture an hour or two of them talking, and then read and have it read for them, and the outcome would probably be better.
What do you do as a publisher if the bulk of the majority of your authors wants to prevent you from using AI tools? You've perhaps read these open letters signed by, 70 authors who exactly wanted to do it like this.
But then I do question how much knowledge they have around the back of it. I mean, of course, there's some very, very smart people, and there'll be other people who bandwagon, I suspect, and just come on and say, yeah, we don't like it either, without really I know you've talked as a general term there for the question, but not using AI tools, there has to be way more definition to it, right? So it might be, the rule sets around what happens when you've recorded their voice, that their voice can't then be used for other things. There may be very specific things, but the general pushback on not using AI is super naive. But then, as with everything innovative or technological in publishing, it's about the education process, and walking people through why it makes sense, what the use cases are, how they're going to do it. So the wider community, everyone's empowered with the same knowledge rather than hearsay. And I love the human voice, right? I did a whole panel on it at London Book Fair. I write articles on this stuff. But I'm not anti-AI because there's amazing use cases where it completely makes sense too. It's something for both.
Perhaps one problem is that this debate is not about reasonable arguments, but about emotion purely.
Yeah, there's definitely in there the emotional side of things, and with good reason too. We work in such an intelligent industry, right? I would say, of course, I was about to say something I shouldn't. I've worked in other industries where there is not the same level of intelligence generally. Right, I would say. But publishers, they're and people within publishing houses, they're curious by their nature and they're intelligent by their nature. You don't bumble into a job at one of these major publishing houses or a smaller publishing house. So, have the intelligence to interrogate those emotional feelings as well. Your decision might still come out the same. I'm just not convinced at the moment that all this fervor around it all is based on knowledge.
Yeah. You had a very interesting idea to kind of create a two-tier system for audiobooks or for content in general due to the AI revolution. How could that look like?
Partly, well, it wasn't me creating it. I just think it's going to appear, I think. Not just AI. I just started thinking about it. I said about how, the content lists are being swamped with AI recordings. And that some of those soon, particularly in the mature markets, we're not even going to know the difference, right? You listen to a recording today, it's going to be the worst you've ever heard. AI. Tomorrow's will be better. That is moving so quickly. So I was thinking more about the innovations elsewhere that are going on in just other versions of audio that you hear. So it might be multicast recordings, fully scored and soundtrack recordings, the ones with high-end Foley, or Dolby Atmos, whatever. Where basically these cost a lot more money to produce. So, and already there's pushback as to where they can be retailed, right? Without even getting into the subscription debates that still go on. And then you've got AI recordings in whichever guise, and you might put into that category as well over time single voice recordings. I just feel, I've just got this sense there will be some categorization between premium audio experience and, I don't have the terminology for it, but a basic single voice, whether that's human or otherwise. And I think consumers will be willing to pay more. You know, we have it in films already. You can have the SD, the HD, or the UHD, you know, versions of films, depending on what your devices can do. I mean, Dolby Atmos, when you sit and listen to those recordings, they're phenomenal. But at the moment in the UK, there's really only Audible for audiobooks. Audible and I think Apple are set up for the experience of it. It's just a hunch I have that we may end.
Yeah, we have it in the printed book world as well. Premium product.
Paperback and hardback. It's a great analogy. Yeah, it's exactly that. That's, you know, so it's not like I think I've found the silver bullet or, you know, discovered something new. It's just a theory that I have.
Nathan, my final and most interesting question for you. So there's an investor who's willing to give you £1 million or euros, I don't know. And you're supposed to prove that this is a particularly exciting time for innovation in publishing, like you said once before. Where would you invest the money, or what would you create with this money?
Oh, I don't think $1 million would be enough.
Okay, 10 million.
No, it doesn't, because it just doesn't mean anything anymore. 10, I don't know. I think first and foremost, it would have to go into the staff and the training.
All right.
And R&D. That's where I put the money. I wouldn't put it on a particular idea. It wouldn't like I'm going to go gamble and say it's this element of AI or it's this new type of format or this new type of storefront. It would be about investing more broadly to go out and find the stuff. So when I was at Penguin, I remember having a spreadsheet at one point of all the projects underway. And it was ridiculous. There were like 40 or 50 things going on at any one time. And some of this would be basic. We're building apps for these book projects, or we're building enhanced ebooks. I'm showing how long ago this was now for these kind of things. But then there were the other ones where met this cool guy in Seattle that did X, Y, and Z. And I would give him a batch of books to safely experiment with. They might have been out of copyright or with they were agented or authored by open-minded individuals, and give them some parameters, and they would run and do stuff and report back. So there was like a wealth of these things going on. And if there wasn't that happening and there wasn't the support from on high to do that, then the innovation that we did achieve would never have happened, because you would never put your money in one space. So it's about my answer's broader.
So distribute your money very broadly.
Have an innovation slush fund.
Yeah.
With some sensible ways of how it's spent. So it's not like give this new startup 50,000. I'm not on about investing in that sense, but I'm on about, right, you've got $1 million or 10 million, right? You treat it like a mini business, right? Which staff do you need to recruit, and for, you know, in which roles with which skill sets? How are you going to upskill them? And then how are you going to spend some of that other money? And have an idea of what you're trying to solve. So if you went back to some of the other things I was saying about discoverability is going to be a huge challenge ongoing. Focus on that.
Okay.
And you have the right people in there.
Let me put it differently. If Warren Buffett was your uncle, right? And he would give you lots of money, what startup would you suggest to him to invest his money? What publishing startup?
I don't know, man. I'm not going to tell everyone, am I? If I've got the idea. I've got ideas, but I'm not going to give them away.
You said these are the most exciting of times for publishing. So where are the most interesting startups?
Because there's so many other things coming in, right? So if you look at so finally, we're not a one-horse town with audio, because at least Spotify has come along, which has meant other people have then started to bubble up, right? So there's little startups appearing. Internationally, there's audio startups appearing everywhere because the buzz around audio and listening generally. So this might include podcasts too. There's more and more attention being paid by publishers to AV content. You know, what are people going to watch? And I remember thinking about this at Penguin too. Like there used to be this kids program when I was growing up called Jackanory, which I came in with a project called Project This Is Not Jackanory. And it is literally a well-known face reading a kid's book out loud for bedtime. suddenly that's one of the most common programs on BBC for kids. There's always these little ideas everywhere that are video related. So I think there's still a lot of space for that. All of Spotify's investment, or the talk and the talk in podcast world is about AV as well. So I'd have a heavy look at that. I think there's some amazing startups in and around academic and educational subscriptions because students can't afford those printed books anymore. So that whole industry feels like it's flipped. And then the whole what 11 Labs are doing is just if I was a publisher, one of the agreements I'd be strongly considering, and maybe they are, is the footprint. So I think one of the guys spoke on one of your events recently, and the numbers he talked about from the 11 Labs reader literally made my jaw hit the table. They were so big. And they were very much talking about other people being able to create, translate all their works, put out the ebooks, and then have the audiobook immediately and all these. But the numbers, just with a commercial head on, were fucking mind-blowing. So if I was a publisher, I'd be like, well, I'd just like my audiobooks, my human-voiced audiobooks on that platform. It just feels like a commercial outlet with millions of people going to it already. So that's an example of where you don't have to be the innovator building the thing, but you could be innovative in your thought processes. And it's not complicated, is it? I mean, to go, there's a lot of people there. Do you reckon they might buy my stuff? So lots to consider, but starting the conversation isn't hard.
Starting the conversation, right? So interesting times, right?
Really, really exciting times. But we got to be on our A game, like everyone. So me on the startup side, people within the publishers, just got to be on our A game, front and center. Be curious, be courageous.
And you are helping us very much to understand this new, interesting times. Thank you very much, Nathan.
Thanks for the opportunity. Good to chat, Dan.